Well, it is that time again for a WebBot summary. And this time I'm not giving the little preamble about what it is and how it works and all that. I'm just going to get right into it. So this WebBot report came out a few days ago. Basically, I think the 1st of July. I think Cliff sent me a copy in my email. It's called Shock the Monkey regarding August 2016, covering the year 2016 through 2048. That's what the data is going to be covering. As usual, this is a summary, not even close to what all of this report talks about. I handpick what I want to talk about. If you, the viewer, wants to know everything in this report, you can go to halfpasthuman.com and order it for $15. And I get every one of them because I find them invaluable. They are better than chance as far as their accuracy on a lot of things they talk about. So it can't be chance that it got it right. But here we go. Terra entity. Planetary changes are still showing as being the primary mover of humanity over the rest of 2016 and beyond. The data sets continue to grow in support of diaspora, and it is clear that there are to be many cases or causes showing up beneath our feet or from the sky over our heads for a number of years. The Terra entity has new longer-term sets that are forecasting the major changes in the planet to be impacting through 2045, the year, and then waning with intermittent bursts of activity for the next 84 years. So 4 generations more or less. Basically, as Cliff talked about in the past, expando planet theory, as he called it, we're going to be dealing with that and all the things that happen because of that. The mane of the horse, as in M-A-N-E, the mane of the horse is a reference that has been gaining new supporting sets over the last 2 processing periods. In this instance, there are no less than 4 large geographic regions that are referenced as being part of the horse, which is a land feature. These include the Middle East, a section of the Caucasus Mountains, a section of the western ridge of mountains in Mexico, and an extensive area in the Badlands or western USA, also including parts of Utah and Nevada. Without regard to which of these 4 regions is being described, the data sets are accruing for a breakdown of the sub-base material that in turn leads to sudden channeling in the surface of the region. The channeling is described as sort of a riverbed look to it, but water is not involved, at least not on the surface effect. The data shows that in a similar fashion to the disappearing rivers, which are here this evening and gone the next morning, this channel of the surface of the earth is supported by rapid, overnight, within vision, watching it occur, and many other sets, including support for video to be released of the event or phenomenon as it rolls across the landscape. I will tell you, WebBot has already said in advance, rivers here today, gone tomorrow, lakes here today, gone tomorrow, and we've had, I think, 4 or 5 now of events of that exact thing happening, and I've reported on it, just for any new people. How would it know this in advance? That's the mystery of this freaking WebBot software. It just does. I don't care how it does. I know it works. Has a decent track record. It's not perfect. So whenever there's a WebBot hit, old JSNIP4 is reporting it. If you wanted to see some of them, just type in WebBot hit JSNIP4 in YouTube, and there'll probably be a ton that come up. The dipping and running dimples of the landscape are described as taking out roads, toppling water towers, and caving in long streets, where further details show that rooftops of houses on opposite sides of the street will be touching as the street sinks away below the houses. One thing I do need to mention, I put these in different paragraphs, as I go down. I may have skipped pages or sections and then just put it where I wanted to start the next thing as the next paragraph, so it may not flow like you would expect if I was reading you a book or a story. All right, next one. Whereas in past Alta or Redbot reports, we have had flooding be a dominant factor in many entities, in this report we have winds taking over that role. The number of new sets and supporting positions across all the model space that we have winds as a directly held value has escalated to overtake the flooding language by about 10%. So to me it sounds like flooding and winds coming to a planet near you. We've already seen some of the flooding. Not to mention, just days ago, somewhere in the Northeast, I think it was, flooding has happened. Actually, a few people were killed, if I recall. So the flooding language has been replaced by wind language, but only by about 10% higher for wind. This is an exceptional shift in our data processing history, as the flooding set has been the dominant set for at least 4 years. Even pollution patterns are indicated to be altered by the reversal of the winds and the increasing wind activity. The wind's change is shown as moving masses of probably Chinese pollution that will then be affecting new areas and causing new protests and disturbing health changes. These sets are also filling with data showing that some rich enclaves will be the new bitching centers, as suddenly their clean or cleaner environment becomes smothered, as the new winds will blow pollutants the wrong way. These sets have many cross-links over to the Space Goat's farts entity, where we have terminating sets indicating that bizarre schemes will be put forward by the rich, now suffocating under new pollution. And when he says the Space Goat's farts entity, that is the entity that he doesn't really have a name for. Like, he's got Terra entity, Markets entity. This is like out there, outer space, maybe alien stuff, unknown, woo-woo, whatever you want to call it. That's what he categorizes off of that. The data sets for a large and damaging earthquake in western China is still building new support sets, albeit slowly. There are larger builds for a very damaging earthquake within the longer-term data sets primarily, which are known to be unreliable as to timing for North America. There are also sets for the sinkhole stitchery to crack Japan and to induce both a minor tsunami affecting Hawaii hardly at all, and an echo earthquake along the California coast. Again, most of these new sets are longer term and are focusing more on mid-2017 and beyond. I'm not sure what an echo earthquake actually is, to be honest with you, but to me it sounds like it's something that happens underground and makes noise where everyone can hear it, maybe feel it a little bit, but it sounds like it more so than feeling it. My opinion on that one, I don't know. The earthquakes in China are not limited to the far western regions. We have a number of sets for the intrusion of a substantial earthquake that will disable industrial shipments and disturb port facilities on the northern Chinese coast. What makes this earthquake notable is the presence of a number of foreign ships and dignitaries, both of which are showing as being damaged, at least to the extent of eliciting international press coverage. So on to that was basically the Terra entity that I've summarized a lot of that, picked and choose some things I want to talk about. Global Pop, same story. And that's what we're on to next. The Global Pop sets are bringing in new subsets for disruptions and upsets / overturnings and replacement and many other descriptors going to the idea of a major social changes language. The nature of the changes are diverse and show up across many different sets and entities, but are all participating in forming a picture of Western humanity in transition. The high levels of emotional values behind the disruptions and the overturning of the existing systems are derived from the very large increase in hyperinflation language showing up. The datasets are predicting hyperinflation to be a very active word over these next 2 years as more and more countries fall into the deflation trap. Note that the data sets are showing that all of the hyperinflation victim countries are petrodollar linked. So in other words, US dollar linked. These new hyperinflation sets are forecasting that Africa and both North and South America will be whipsawed by both deflation and hyperinflation over these next 2 years to such an extent that the dollar empire crumbles and nation states recreate themselves, as well as spawn new nations. Some of these new nation states are indicated to be geographically bound or surrounded by older, dying nations. That's one of the things, again, when we're looking at the web bot and it gives you a time frame, many times the time frame has come and gone and it didn't happen, only to be found to happen later on. It is what it is. Cliff High can't make the web bot better at this point. It gives you times and dates sometimes. It gives you a reference. Sometimes the summer or spring or fall, things like that, but not necessarily the exact date and being spot on. There have been some times, by the way, where it did give that exact time and it was right on the money. Moving on, a few of the new nation states to emerge from within existing borders have as their seeds actions that will begin in 2016. Some of the supporting sets include alliances between traditional foes within the global pop, such as labor unions and students. The data sets are forecasting that the old tactic of divide and conquer is going to fail miserably as the dollar empire dies, taking with it many of the staples of the safety nets in society. Across much of the globe, the majority within the northern hemisphere, the financial resources that had fed the political diversity of the past few decades is posited to dry up in such a fashion that all of society that is a social system dependent finds themselves coming together / bonding against a common enemy. The data sets are forecasting that the bonding of the distressed students and the depleted pensioners and the failing labor unions is going to create a situation within the ruling elite and the financial system in which those statists and their backers will be making several very large mistakes that will involve both bad decisions and bad behavior run amok. In these instances, the statists will find that there is no help for the cutting situation. The global pop entity is forecasting that the global depression brought about by the central bankers and the political authorities is but being born. The depression, in other words, it's just getting started. The depression lexical sets are now including language around deflation. The global depression and the global deflation supporting sets are pointing toward a situation in which deflation is eating housing prices, commercial real estate prices, and most other debt collateral, as there are no credit takers to continue debt-based asset growth. These sets are very confusing and bring in a number of seemingly conflicting subsets. However, the data has pointed to focus on the crumbling of the fiat currencies that are falling and falling so fast as to create greater political instability. These sets are directly tied to the rising popular actions and the new leadership from the core people's movements. The dynamic deflation, that is the feared death disease by the central bankers' authorities, is showing to be as being the dominant factor in the rest of 2016 and through to at least mid-2017. The data sets are forecasting that the deflation is like an aggressive cancer as the credit freeze hits various parts of the economy like an ice pick. This deflation is described as being cancerous in that it is not general or blanketing, but rather is described as eroding and tunneling in other language that goes to the idea of a twisted, interconnected tunnels that are lacing through the financial systems. The individual detail sets are bringing up assets such as debt on real estate, debt on energy, debt on art, debt on students, debt on debts, being the origins of the tunnels. These tunnels are describing the former assets that had been nominally backing the debt as being destroyed at zero or near zero for most of these debt-based assets. So what was once considered a piece of paper that was an asset is either no longer an asset at all, it's zero, or so little you could wipe your rear end with it and probably have more use of it. There are extensive crosslinks over to the markets entity where the terminating sets include very large representation of gold, silver, and Bitcoin. The data is showing that it is the dynamic deflation that starts in the Italian banking system, which in turn is described as spreading like mold through overripe fruit into the global banking/derivatives system. It is the derivatives subset that contains most of the language for violence and disruption. Other subsets include repudiation and explosive detonation, in which a counterparty is blown up for failure to pay, all of which leads to cascading crashcade defaults and bad words between former partners. European pop. We are looking for the new leaders of the core people's movement to be stepping forward over these next 12 months. The data sets have growth around our previously mentioned street violence hero subset, and now we have new sets suggesting that the hero, who will find himself or herself at the center of the core people's movement, will be backed up/supported by a very astute political genius from the far north. We are getting hints that the astute political advisor forecast to create the center around the young hero has a sublimated letter in his name. We do get such language hints occasionally, and in the past they have proven valuable as temporal markers. The center to be formed within the core peoples is showing as overturning the local politics over much of Northern and Eastern Europe in what will be described as exceptionally fast time. In the data sets, there are repeated references to the speed of the political transformation of European pop, as it will be utterly recreated in mere months. As may be expected, the tumult within the political structure of the EU is going to roll out and downhill. Unfortunately for the officialdom, the data sets are showing that the population does not follow the dictates, and by August, the data is forecasting that the new meme du jour is to be the active breakup of NATO. This NATO breaks down/apart meme is also providing support for the USA military unable to get soldiers back home due to economic problem subsets. A shift has occurred in the focus of much of the new growth coming into the European pop entity into a German and Austrian subsets. These sets are suggesting that there will be an attempt to enforce the EU core by groups in these countries. However, the data is also quite clear that their efforts have not a chance to succeed, as failure is assured due to the rapidly unfolding global conditions, which include the assault on debt-based asset prices by deflation and debt repudiation and debt destruction. These and many other sets are indicating that there will be turmoil in the old town tonight, metaphorically, as the German peoples wrestle with the failing euro currency and the collapsing social cohesion that is being described much as the peace of the former Eastern European communist republics in what it was dictates from above that kept their systems together, not an organic union. The data sets are forecasting that the combination of the global credit freeze, mainly Western countries to start, and the deflation of the Italian banks is going to disturb the Vatican, as it will suddenly find that it is wrestling with debts that were hidden by paper trails. Much of this language is supported by the failing counterparty subsets within the dynamic deflation linguistic structures. There are a number of new sets for an incident of lost documents, which will turn out to be a very large embarrassment for officialdom, both before the documents, likely a computer, are found and then for months afterward. The data gives the inference that the carelessness may well be or have been deliberate in an attempt to leak certain information, and it goes spectacularly well if that was the intent. These sets are part of a group of 3 temporal marker linguistic structures for the longer-term value sets of the core people's movement and the Pan-Europe Unknown Alliance that is indicated to be dominating the politics of both Europe and the Middle East by the early 2020s. While there are some data sets hinting that it will be NATO documents that are lost, the more interesting subsets are those providing some details as to the finders of the documents, as they are described as being an alternate community from a self-governing zone. This conjunction of characteristics in what propels the contents of the documents to such prominence in such a shockingly short period. There are further sets that indicate success of the release campaign will also be due to the diligence that the community takes in providing audio versions in multiple languages, as well as the original documents, including videos on social media video. There are a number of longer-term sets going to the idea of political shift for Australia as the USA dollar, Federal Reserve note, falls to so low as to be unable to support in purchasing power the American military outposts inside Australia. These sets are within the supporting chain for our very long-held sets for too broke to get soldiers back home. These sets are now gaining new supporting sets that are filling with both shorter-term and immediacy data types, indicating that these events are now much closer. Also, we need to note that these sets are part of a larger long-held temporal marker that is just at the beginning of the alteration of humanity as USA dollar empire implodes and the world of markets drastic changes. Canada Pop is showing as having similar issues to Australia Pop as regards the USA dollar, or in regards to the USA dollar. The data sets are describing a situation in which the legs of the chair supporting the USA dollar, Federal Reserve note, and the banking structure are going to go wobbly and cause downward pressures. Note that the idea, or the data, would seem to be suggesting directly that the Canadian dollar is among the legs that will be wobbling downward ahead of the US dollar over these next few months and into 2017. These sets are seemingly implying that the wobble described is a rubber band effect within the global currencies market, as well as within each currency as regards its purchasing power. So basically, the data is forecasting that the Canadian dollar, along with the Aussie dollar, will be dropping ahead of the rate of fall of the USA dollar, at least for the next 2 months or so. Increasing desperation for the falling local government tax revenues appears in sets that support the idea of cooperation in an active manner with Chinese officialdom, such that Chinese capital controls police will be seen on the streets of a few select Canadian cities as they work with local authorities to detain wanted individuals from China, essentially. It turns out it is a very small world after all. Canada Pop has a new growth for crushing debt at a public service level, such that odd taxes and bonds behavior gets to the point that it becomes visible in the world markets. This appears to be a digital money creation situation that is slowly losing the ability to maintain parity with the deflationary drain that is behind the scenes sucking out productivity. These sets contain subsets for currency woes and currency liquidity failures that are pointing toward failing construction companies as their projects, even not completed, become worth more every day, but daily costs become too crushing to meet. The Caribbean Pop, as he calls it. Yet more data growing, because last report he had something about this treasure ship of ancient times is going to be found somewhere over in that neighborhood. It was coming in the data, and it's still here, and there's some more information on it. Yet more data growing in our sets for a shipwreck find that is going to have ancient mummies that are described as having a gut-gripping effect on the power elite. The data sets are filling with language for dangerous addiction to the knowledge, and curiosity is painful, and desperate bad behavior to know. These sets are part of a larger lexical structure that has large yachts and new power centers arriving in the Caribbean following the discovery of the mummy wreck. This is indicated to be a large enough level of activity that it will show up in incidental video coverage on the net. The data suggests that a story of a trying to be quiet invasion of the affected region of the Caribbean will get out by the displacement of the cruise ships and closing of tourist spots. While there are a large number of crosslinks over to the Space Goats Farts entity, the terminating sets are within unknown aspects, so no help there. These sets are continuing to build both shorter-term and longer-term values. The longer-term sets are post-discovery and are suggesting that the impacts will have a very long duration, whatever may be the actual discovery. These sets are also cross-linked over to the Terra and Space Goats Farts entity, where we have terminating sets supporting the mysteries of the ocean's linguistic structures. Some of the shorter-term sets include descriptors for climate change realignment and global cooling and ice age and ancient people and unknown mummies. Unlike the presentations of films, these mummies themselves are the focus and apparent interest of the elites. The idea coming across the datasets from the datasets is that the mummies are either not human or are mummies from some very, very, very far past, distant past, as in before the previous ice age, which would be interesting in and of itself, because then how did we have sailing ships and how did these mummies last so long underwater, would be my question. The data sets are pointing to the contradictions inherent in the elite PR statements of old shipwreck, move along, nothing to see here, and the incredible and frightening to the locals amount of money and resources. The resources are going to include at least one more or less permanent power ship that will just sit and generate electricity for months. These sets include details of locals who will complain about the constant noise and air pollution from the power ship and will be displaced and forcibly relocated for their trouble. So this power ship sounds like a big ship with it, I don't know if it's nuclear powered or whatever, but it's going to generate power for the operation in the area, and it's going to be massive, and it's going to cause this little issue for these people. China Pop. I made this one very short and sweet. The Chinese taste for Bitcoin is showing up across both the China Pop entity and the markets entity as model spaces progress through July and the rest of summer. The data sets are forecasting that China Pop is going to subsume the global demand for Bitcoin in a rushing frenzy that will be labeled in China as climbing the waterfall. This period is for the first three very large waves of Chinese purchasing of Bitcoin for the next 18 months. Part of the drive to purchase Bitcoin within China Pop comes from the currency changes discussed in the previous Alta report. These sets continue to grow for the ongoing devaluation process to accelerate, which, as may be expected, is indicated to cause yet more Bitcoin purchases. USA Pop. Watch for the impact of the infrastructure crises of summer 2016 to begin in earnest in July, along with a labeled crisis periods, see markets entity. The data sets are forecasting that there will be a noticeable increase in natural disasters of the summer kind. These natural disasters impacting the USA Pop are forecast to include many which will be natural but not recognized as such, as the underlying causal factor is showing as the Earth expansion effects. Examples of this will include grandstand collapses, indicated to happen both empty and with people in them. Grandstand as in someone's watching a show and they're in the stadium or the stand, so to speak. Indicated to happen both empty and with people in them. Other disasters include rides and attractions where hidden Earth expansion problems are described as surfacing with spectacular imagery within the resulting videos. Other examples include near-instant draining of water park facilities as the topography changes due to earthquakes. As an interesting note, within the earthquakes section are 3 individual sets for female hero. These female hero subsets or sets are seemingly describing 3 separate heroines who will be brought or forced into prominence by their unselfish, life-risking actions over the early summer. These instances are temporal markers for larger memes to emerge over this very pivotal time. We have some small descriptors for attributes of the women involved, and yes, it would seem that in spite of youth being one attribute, all of the women are adults. Further, we find that at least one will be an army girl with tattoos or tats. Other attributes are forecast to be bringing thousands of marriage proposals to one of the women. Look out for the resurgence of an old-time economic religion within the ruling elite of USA Pop, as the idea of price controls will come to be floated about in front of the public as the hyperinflation starts. It is during these credit crises days that a much larger group of USA Pop is forecast to get Bitcoin fever. While there are some gambling on price appreciation aspects / attribute sets, it apparently will be the utility of Bitcoin that will be the drawing factor in USA Pop. This is showing up not within the mass of USA Pop, but within subsets that are international and business focused. The data sets are suggesting this increased use are within the supporting chain for the Bitcoin as international settlement vehicle because it's too expensive to pass around gold subset. So it's easier to pass around a Bitcoin than it is gold, is what they're saying here. All right, so I just pause it for a second. I had to see roughly how long I've been doing this video. This particular software doesn't actually have like a timer that tells me how long. So I've been at this about 30 minutes right now. And as you know, or some of you, Cliff High has asked me, when you do these summaries, can you try to keep them to around 30 minutes or so? Because I used to do some that would be an hour long. And he creates these reports. It costs him a lot of money to have the server hardware, the bandwidth, the rack space. So he does, in all fairness, need to get paid for his work, which is why he's charging, which to me is low, $15 for these reports. So I got quite a bit more I wanted to discuss. And I'm only going to do this a few more minutes out of respect for him. So I'm going to now have to cut a lot more out that I want to talk about. But again, if you want the report, you want to read all of it, go to halfpasthuman.com and you can buy it there right through PayPal. He even accepts Bitcoin if you want to use Bitcoin. So let me get with it real quick and end this. What is indicated to, shock the monkey freak out officialdom during the middle of summer is the dollar following the euro falling downstairs. These downward falls are indicated to prompt significant changes across the social order. Some signs of these changes are not only the lines for silver and gold, but also the $20 day moves upward in price for silver and $500 days moves in gold. These movements in price are indicated to be altering the political background of the USA Pop and causing severe strain among the ruling elite criminals. The strain indicators for this period will be seen in the bad behavior and dying parts of major banks. Markets entity. Once again, Bitcoin, it's going to go through $1,000. It's going to go through $2,000 in a relatively short period of time, but I think he said it might be within like 8 months or something potentially. But I'm just kind of scrolling down to touch on a few things. Detail layers are providing very large sets of unknown elements for a late September surprise. And I'm going to do another video, speaking of September 23rd, by the way, that I saw blaring out at me in my face as I watched a movie the other day called Money Monster, which is about Wall Street, corruption, fraud. And man, was that number 7 punching you in the face. And I saw what to me looked like the date, 9/23. And it would be this year. So I want to do another video on that. So where was this at? Detail layers are providing very large sets of unknown elements for a late September surprise that may involve energy sector, such as electrical system shutdown, that has a large number of cross-links over to the East Coast USA markets. This is heavily cross-linked, shows before or on the September equinox, and is a totally new set with a few detail sets presenting the images of a very disjointed picture puzzle of a long-lasting blackout that will also shut down both the transport and the data transport, including, as Dr. Evil would say, lasers, which will have the impact of stalling and misdirecting the algos or algorithms on Wall Street, as well as causing some of the high-frequency trading systems to freak out. Side note from myself, I wrote this as I was reading this. I remember reading about lasers a couple years ago being put on top of buildings in cell towers in New York City. And was it in Chicago also? Because the Chicago Mercantile Exchange is there. Maybe it was also in Chicago, I don't remember. That can transfer information extremely fast and with the lowest ping time imaginable. And that was the selling point. While you want to use the data infrastructure, even with fiber, is great. But see that building over there? If we beam a laser beam from here to there, your facility to there, you have even faster response times. So high frequency trading is looking at all the trades coming in and can, again, front run everyone else and make the trades faster than everyone else so it can get in on it faster. That's why the lasers were put up. It was the selling point. This is faster than your fiber optic cables. This is faster than your typical copper. It is laser technology. They don't go very far, but you don't need to. When you're in New York City and the place you need to get to is in New York City and you have a straight shot on a little tower on top of the building, or you don't even need a tower technically, depending on some of the buildings, straight shot, boom, we're good to go. Excuse me. So if that goes down, a lot of high frequency trade, well, not necessarily a lot, but some of them will be going down because their laser system may not work. Then what? So again, I have to cut this short right now. I don't know if I've ever had to do that where I couldn't read you the rest of my own report, because usually I can kind of gauge how long it is and, talk a little bit quicker, whatever I got to do to try to make it within that 30-minute time frame. So we'll have to see if, maybe if Cliff's available in the next week or two. I've been doing little interviews with him on like a Saturday, and with the way things have unfolded in Europe and currently happening, man, his web bot was pretty much predicting a Brexit scenario. So I said that too. So if I'm to believe the web bot, Brexit's going to happen. If I'm to believe the web bot not going to be right on this one, maybe Brexit won't happen. We'll just continue kicking the can for a while. But it did happen, and now the fallout's taking place, both real, or rigged to happen. It is happening, period. So that'd be an interesting conversation, I think. So I want to get on with this next video, and I set myself an Outlook reminder. September 23rd, JSNIP, pop-up, Outlook reminder. Anything with markets and crashing today, anything, how's it looking? Which happens to be a Friday. So maybe I'll have to wait till Monday. They love doing stuff on a Friday, then do stuff to where, you find out Monday morning you can't move money or whatever it is. Take care.